Let's talk about the pay gap bullcrap myth once again. Um, I'm going to put an article in the link description box, and I'm going to let you listen to the video audio of Kate Hymowitz discuss the pay gap bullcrap myth. Now, she really articulates well and breaks down the nonsense. Of course, she doesn't say anything differently than any other MRET YouTubers already said, but she's a female, and I guess it sounds better when it comes from them. But anyways, in the video, she makes some pretty astonishing points. She points out that feminists are leftists. She said from the left, and she breaks down how they use these datas and they do it wrong when they compare apples to oranges. For example, she used the example of a doctor. Most females tend to be pediatricians. Pediatricians make less because the skill set requires less skills. More men become surgeons. Surgeons make more, not because they're men, but because they have an occupation that is more demanding of their time, and it takes a higher skill set to have. Those are all common sense reasons why, and we know that already. But again, this is Reason TV, and this is an article, video audio that breaks down the pay gap
Simon
bullcrap
Fellow
myth.
at the Manhattan Institute. She has a great article in City Journal called The Plight of the Alpha Female. So, Kay, this was fascinating. Now, you point out that American women are better educated than their male counterparts. They're quickly becoming the breadwinners in household. They won more Olympic medals at last year's Summer Olympics.
Yeah.
But at the very top, Fortune 500 companies, investment firms, and law firms, not a lot of women at the very top. Why is that?
Well, one word, the children. Mothers are more likely to take time off than fathers. Or to take longer periods of time off. They are more likely to work part-time. They are more likely to cut back hours in all kinds of ways. If you compare the number of hours worked by men and women, you'll find quite a difference. It's one of the reasons for the well-known gender wage gap. So what happens is that as women are climbing up the career ladder, they're doing great until their mid-30s or so, or earlier mid-30s, and then they tend to back off, and that's of course when the children come. So my view is that we're never going to see the kind of precise, exact equality that we might have hoped at the very top.
Now, you agree that it is childbearing that causes this shift, and Anne-Marie Slaughter wrote a cover piece for The Atlantic called Why Women Still Can't Have It All.
That's right.
And she pines for that equality. Do you think that's necessary? Do you agree that there is injustice?
Well, I mean, it's an injustice, I suppose, if you have a clear sense that it's got to be absolute parity. And I guess I don't believe that has to be. I think that, in fact, we're doing young women and men a disservice by having them expect that. One of the reasons that Anne-Marie Slaughter wrote that article, and one of the reasons she got such an enormous response to it, is that young women went, "Thank you for talking about this dilemma," because my generation of mothers were so determined to see their daughters reach this absolute parity, and a lot of young women are finding it's not possible, or that they're not happy. This is not to say there's no discrimination anywhere. There is, but my reading of the situation is that it's largely driven by a lack of female possibilities as they come through the pipeline. They more and more drop out, whether it's in business, whether it's in the legal world, and whether it's in the higher levels of government.
You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
Well, look, there's a tension between being an engaged parent and being an alpha. I mean, you know, is that an injustice? I think that's just life, you know, and we can't. It's a tension that I don't see how it can ever be fully resolved. There are things we can do to make it easier for not just women but men have a more active family life. We should be talking and are talking a lot about flex time. But there's always going to be somebody else who is working through all those years and producing through all those years and achieving through all those years where you and your husband or wife is taking time off. And there's nothing we can do about that in terms of creating, as I say, absolute parity.
There is a counterintuitive aspect of this where at some law firms where they don't have the most family-friendly flex time practices, women do achieve higher status. Why is that?
Well, because there is no mommy track. So the women who go into those firms are the ones who are completely career oriented. A lot of them don't have children, by the way. I mean, if you look at the statistics, the women who are at the top are more likely, not always, but more likely to be childless than the men at the top. So that tells you right there, there's a different kind of approach to life. And by the way, another piece of evidence for all of this is in Europe. So I looked at the data in Sweden and in France. These are very so-called family-friendly countries where there are all kinds of benefits for young parents, which is fine. You know, I didn't go in.
But paid maternity leave?
Paid maternity leave. In Sweden, paternity leave is almost required. I mean, it's a little complicated how they set it up. Don't need to go into that now. But my real point is this. In the public sector, women have achieved some kind of parity. In the private sector, they have not. And in fact, if anything, if you look at the numbers at the very top, American women are doing better than Swedish women. So the question is why, and what economists have been speculating about as they've studied this, is that the maternity leave actually puts women on this mommy track, which makes it harder to achieve in an extremely competitive environment.
Melissa Mayer, who is the CEO at Yahoo, I mean, she promised that she wasn't going to take maternity leave. It was only going to be a couple weeks, so it wasn't the normal extended one.
And she was going to work.
She was going to work through it. Yeah. I mean, is that compromising childbearing? Does that send a bad message to women?
I think it's not sending a bad message to women to say that some women are really going to want to keep their foot on the gas pedal, as Sheryl Sandberg has put it. But I think it's a mistake for women to come away from that and say, yes, this is possible for everybody and desirable for everybody. It just isn't.
Sheryl Sandberg, who's the CFO at Facebook, she leaves work every day at 5:30 to have dinner with her family. Has technology helped having video conferencing and constant access to email and everything else? Does that create parity in its own?
Oh, absolutely. That has changed everything. I mean, we wouldn't even be having this conversation 30, 40 years ago, not just because women didn't have the same expectations for rising, but because it wasn't possible to keep your hands on the kids at the same time that you were climbing the career ladder in a way that you can do it now.
Now, the American left has become very preoccupied with income inequality here in the United States. And has your insight into female CEOs in this country shed any light on that subject?
Yeah, I think that I'm not looking at the data very carefully. I mean, there's a tendency to mash together all of the numbers in a way that makes it look like there's this terrible discrimination going on. But in my own research, what I've found is that actually women are working fewer hours than men. When we say women are only making 77 cents on the dollar, let's say, which is the current number that's most often cited, that doesn't take into account that they are working fewer hours. They put together all of the numbers in a way that makes it look like there's this terrible discrimination going on. But in my own research, what I've found is that actually women are working fewer hours than men. When we
Has your insight into female CEOs in this country shed any light on that subject?
Yeah, I think that I'm not looking at the data very carefully. I mean, there's a tendency to mash together all of the numbers in a way that makes it look like there's this terrible discrimination going on. But in my own research, what I've found is that actually women are working fewer hours than men. When we say women are only making 77 cents on the dollar, let's say, which is the current number that's most often cited, that doesn't take into account that they are working fewer hours, that they're working in different occupations. So I'll just give you an example in the medical world. Among doctors, women are far less likely to be surgeons than they are to be pediatricians. Well, surgeons make more than pediatricians. Is that because they're men? No, it's because the skill involved, the life and death decisions, the hours, all of that is recompensed in a different way.
So what is the ultimate fix, and where do you come down on the mommy wars? Is it a false battle? Is there no one-size-fits-all fix for the problem?
Absolutely, there's no one size. There's enormous variation in how women and men are going to see this. And I think the idea that you often hear from the left, from feminists, from more traditional feminists, is that we're going to have these 50-50 arrangements. Some people are one size. There's enormous variation in how women and men are going to see this. And I think the idea that you often hear from the left, from feminists, there's enormous variation in how women and men are going to see this. And I think the idea that you often hear from the left, from feminists, from more traditional feminists, is that we're going to have and I think the idea that you often hear from the left, from feminists, from more traditional feminists, is that we're going to have these 50-50 arrangements. Some people are. Most people are not. They're going to find other ways of trying to deal with these tensions that I've been talking about. Because there's such an assumption of discrimination, there is then the conclusion that we need all sorts of government programs, laws, legislations, and various kinds of petitions or whatever to fight this supposed discrimination. My reading of it is that discrimination plays a role, but not a very
notice
large
what she
one.
said. She said that she disagreed with Marie Slaughters, which is the woman who did the article, which I did a video about women can have it all when businesses change the rules. She says she disagrees with her because her notion is that women should have that type of equality, which is equality at all, because women get to bend the rules and change the rules because of their vagina, and we don't want that. But this is my thing, more importantly, that of course feminists are going to say that this benefits men too because they get to spend more time with their kids too. But think about this like this, put it this way: we live in a climate right now where capitalism and the economy is doing bad right now because of all these government legislations, and people, as Rick Mommy would say, we're not making it attractive enough for businesses to stay here. So in this climate, does it make sense to go to tell business that they should change the rules or change their hours to let women basically come to work when they want to come to work, and men in the future, and which means they would produce less, which means they would have to make less too. We don't want to do that. But that's just the point I wanted to point out. What Marie Slaughter, which I'll talk again because she talked about the work-life balance and how women struggle with that issue of wanting to go home, and Hillary told all the women who act like that to shut up. Yeah, but we're going to talk about that again. I'm going to further illustrate why this whole thing is nonsense, because men have always had to deal with the work-life balance. In fact, if they work too much, they come home, they have no family. If they don't work enough, they lose their family. But that's a different story. But
for the same job. But we are used to hearing that women's salaries are just a fraction of that of men for the same job. But get ready for a surprise. Tonight, a brand new report from Bloomberg News about one small group of women. Bloomberg, by the way, is the leading provider of business news worldwide. And ABC's Bianca Goladriga has what's new.
The new report shows that women who run the nation's largest companies, the 16 female CEOs of S&P 500 companies, are far out earning their male counterparts. Their average annual pay over the last few years, just over $14 million.
That means women earned 40% more than men in 2009.
Think of them as a kind of super breed. Carol Bartz, the CEO of Yahoo, has a pay package of $47 million. Kraft CEO Irene Rosenfeld's is $26 million. And Indra Nooyi of PepsiCo's is $16 million.
Kind of like the 16 Supercorp women are doing well, and that's a good sign, but it's not good enough.
In fact, women workers as a whole earn just 79% of the wages earned by men. So what do these 16 know that others don't? For one thing, they clearly have honed serious skills at the negotiating table. Studies have shown that most women are far less aggressive in negotiations than men. Take a look at this ABC News Behavior Lab. The volunteers were told they would be paid between $5 and $12 for their time participating in a study. All were offered the minimum. Take a look at how men and women differed in their reactions.
I would like the max, of course.
More than half of the men asked for more money, but only a third of the women bargained for more.
$5 okay?
Yeah.
Great.
Of course, giant systemic barriers exist in the workplace that impact a woman's career as well. The 16 women at the top benefit from one thing most don't have going for them. They work for public companies run by boards who can't afford to be seen as shortchanging women while the world looks on. The hope is the few who have made it can start that change from the top.
If my job went out there with that kind of earning, I guess I'd want to make a real commitment to seeing that every woman in my company was paid fairly. If I'm being paid like that, I want all of you to be paid fairly, absolutely.
And on the subject of transparency, the report also found that female CEOs at smaller companies, those that are less high profile than those in the S&P 500, make a lot less than their male counterparts, so that Super 16 is not quite the norm yet, Diane.
But they've blazed some kind of trail, and because their salaries can be seen in part, Bianca, do you think is how much